In this no-filter episode of Admissify podcast, we ask questions every student wishes they could have asked someone who has walked their walk. Let's start with the elephant in the room, the US.
These days, as everybody knows, there's a very controversial president in town, and Trump is pushing an agenda of isolation. It's branded as America First.
So, Admissify has really lived up to its tagline of being a career placement expert. What kind of success stories has Admissify built?
We've sent thousands of students abroad. We have brand ambassadors as well, who students can actually speak to, who have not only got jobs but are based abroad, working abroad, and actually who are kind of invaluable in the positions that they're in. They've got into really senior positions.
Why is this not being talked about more, and what do you think is like the math behind this that students are missing?
I think, unfortunately,
to help us decode it all, I'm joined by someone who has helped thousands of students go abroad the smart way, not the Instagram reel way. He's the founder of Admissify, Mr. Rahul Lakshman. Over to you.
Thank you very much for that intro. I hope this podcast is beneficial to a lot of people.
Let's start with the elephant in the room, the US. Everyone wants to go there, but no one's talking about the growing visa revocations. Why are students getting deported, and what is the reality behind the scenes?
So, I think these days, as everybody knows, there's a very controversial president in town, and Trump is pushing an agenda of isolation. It's branded as America First, but what's really happening is America's isolating itself on the world stage, be that through foreign policy or be it through the trade war. Trump has just recently acknowledged that the trade tariffs are not working. The tariff war, as it's called, is not working. It is going to further probably cause a shrinkage of the US economy. They call it a decoupling from the world economy, which is very, very different to what Biden was trying to do just before. So we can certainly say, as far as US politics is concerned, it's very unpredictable. We don't know what flavor we're going to get from 4 years to 4 years. Now, for most students that are going to the US now, they will, by the time they finish their studies, they're most likely, particularly for master students, they're most likely to be in, it's still within this president, this 47th Trump term, which means that they'll be subject to any rules that he implements, immigration rules he implements until then. Now, recently Trump has been using executive orders to pass policy, which means that bills aren't really even going through Congress, which also then means that Trump can do what he likes. And he's pretty much got the mandate to do that as well. But that mandate is coming about from a slightly jingoistic pandering to the Republican voter base in the US, which means that today today the focus might be Muslim immigrants, as it was in his 45th term, as 45th presidential term, or it might be Indians in the coming future. Now, bear in mind, there's been a lot of illegal Indian immigration to the US, which means that in a few years, maybe the American voter base will be fed up of illegal aliens, as they call them, that are from an Indian heritage, as they are frustrated with illegal aliens from Mexico, which could then cause a mass deportation policy, or likewise, which again will make it probably or quite likely to be a hostile area. Furthermore, I would say there are a lot of visa revocations, as I think you just mentioned. Yeah. And the F1 and M1 visas from the US could have long-standing rule changes. H1B visa requirements have also gone up quite a lot. They're only going to be awarded to people with extremely high value salaries, and therefore that means extremely senior people, which again, is not somebody who's starting on their career ladder now, will not probably be applicable, even with a few years of experience, for an H1B visa, as they used to be before, since they want, very senior positions. Yeah, I hope that goes some way to explain the US situation right now.
It absolutely does, which brings me to my next question. So, should students even consider US anymore as their study abroad destination?
I think the US is still going to be an amazing study destination. It depends on what you're using it for. So the Ivy Leagues will still always be the Ivy Leagues. Some of the best executive MBAs in the world are from Wharton, Yale, Harvard, Stanford, etc. Some of the best technical degrees from MIT and other such universities. So they're not going anywhere. The US is still an amazing study destination. The courses and colleges are still highly ranked, highly reputed, and with lots of new programs for tomorrow's world, so to speak. So yes, it's a brilliant study destination. But if people are now relying on it to stay back in the US for a long time, and particularly for PR, then perhaps we should acknowledge the fact that the US is becoming more isolated on a world stage. It's a self-isolation route that they're going down, and it's become slightly unpredictable. So I don't think anybody should be betting on the US for studies with a particular PR goal in mind. That said, if the aim of the game is education, then certainly it is one of the best study destinations with some of the best institutions. Now, just to give you an example, if somebody has done maybe 3 or 4 years of corporate experience in India, or run, say, a family business or other such concern, and then they want to come to the US for an executive MBA, for which you need a minimum of 3 years experience, and they want to come back and either be in a management role or an executive role in a family business or other such business that they have a good reputation in or good experience in, then that would be, again, awesome. If somebody wants to then use that learning, say, to start up a venture of their own, a startup of their own, then again, some of the knowledge and experience and the contacts you'll make at the top business schools in the US will be next to none. It'll be some of the best exposure, experience, and learning that you're likely to get anywhere.
So what about students who have already started preparing for their study abroad journey to US? Like, any piece of advice that you can give to them to ease their anxiety given the turbulent times going on in US?
Yeah, so I would say it's probably not worth worrying too much. I mean, it is going to be unpredictable. Where the US ends up in 2 years is not really known. If there's any new immigration policies or anything else. What I would say is that it's not worth panicking about it, but it is worth adjusting your expectations in line with what kind of policy you think the US is going to go in for. That's not to invalidate or underestimate the value of a US degree, particularly at the top schools and state universities. The learning will be amazing. And to be frank, an education is building ourselves up. It's enriching our knowledge. It's enriching what we can become. So a well-polished tool...
Whether it is in US or anywhere else.
Absolutely. So a well-polished tool can be used anywhere. You can start a job anywhere at any MNC, and you can explore a world of opportunities. It doesn't just have to be staying back in the US.
Yeah. Now let me play devil's advocate for a moment. India is on a growth trajectory, and we are hearing the term Viksit Bharat oftentimes. But a worrying trend has emerged. More and more graduates, including those from elite B schools, are struggling to find jobs that match their qualifications. So the big question is education just a means to an end today? Like a checkbox in the rat race?
I'd say it's a very interesting predicament that India finds itself in now. As far as the economy is concerned, it's an amazing economy, the world's fastest growing major economy, and it is going to stay like that for quite some time. The next 10 to 20 years for the Indian economy and India as a whole is extremely exciting. So we shouldn't discount that. What we should think about is how can we take advantage of the world's best opportunities, and as I say, the best of all worlds. Take the best that we can, and make ourselves let ourselves take advantage of the world and its opportunities. Additionally, I'd say an Indian education is extremely good, but the equation has changed in relation to the opportunities and the education you can get abroad. Before, it was cheaper to study in India, and it was more expensive to study abroad. Well, that gap has now closed in quite significantly. The competition for places in India has gone up many times, and we are pretty much talking about 8 to 10 lakh fees for good business colleges or technical colleges in India. Well, that's pretty much the same as Europe or other destinations. The courses abroad are also quite a lot shorter. Now, I would say with that gap closed in now, the opportunity cost of going is well worth an analysis of whether it be of going abroad or staying in India. So if we can go abroad for the similar sort of money, but instead you can do a course which is a multidisciplinary course, you can mix science with commerce, which is the need of the hour really. And it's not just the need of the hour in say business with technical courses or like computing, etc. It is also the need of the hour in terms of AI and psychology and other such interesting combinations that foreign universities, especially Western universities, offer. Tomorrow's world is changing extremely fast, and the degree programs that you study need to be up to date with it. Unfortunately, those programs aren't available in India, whereas they are available abroad. That's not to say that an education in India is not good, but it is to say that an education abroad will probably set you up for tomorrow's world and a career to take advantage of our future, what our future is going to be, whether that be AI or high tech. You'll be able to really take advantage of that with an international degree. I'd like to add on that Ernst & Young did a study about employability of Indian graduates, and the study was pretty damning. It detailed how Indian graduates are completely not ready for the job market, and in fact Indian employers don't really focus on a graduate's degree ability. They look mainly at experience, since the graduate degree is not really very helpful in the job world. That's very different to what it is abroad. The courses are so relevant, they're so up to date, and the courses
very industry oriented, I would assume that.
Yes, that's true. As well as applied. The learning is applied as opposed to regurgitated knowledge. So for example, I'd say one of the major differences between the method of education in India and overseas is that we have there's a much bigger focus on applied learning abroad.
Yeah.
It's less about memorizing some particular content. If you can take your study book into the exam in India, you can pretty much get 100%,
Yeah.
since your exams are more based on memory recall. Whereas abroad, if you can actually take your book into some exams, but it has no bearing on whether you're going to pass that exam or not. Yeah. Since if you can't apply that knowledge, you will not succeed. That's the real difference in the employability of a graduate coming out of the Indian education system and unfortunately coming out of the further education system abroad. That doesn't apply all the way around. Obviously, your IITs and your IIMs in India are very good universities. There are other good colleges as well. But again, the tests and the learning method is based more on recall than it is on applied learning. I would say, on top of that, the availability or the ability to do these modern courses and these really cutting edge courses make you a very employable prospect in terms of a lot of companies that don't just want a broad generic degree like engineering or mechanical engineering. if you've done robotics with AI or mechatronics with 3D printing or something like that, you're far more likely to get a niche job, and particularly a high-paying niche job, than you would otherwise. On top of that, there are a lot of post-study work options abroad, which you can then utilize and to leverage to get some employment experience abroad, which then again, as and when you come back to India, if that's what someone decides, makes you a lot better of a candidate in terms of getting a higher paid and more senior role.
So it's almost like studying abroad is not just a dream anymore, but like it's quietly becoming a necessity.
I would say it's certainly, I mean, if not a necessity, I would say the proposition of studying abroad has certainly become a lot more valuable, with the cost difference becoming very, very much smaller. So in terms of a realistic prospect, it's far more realistic, far more affordable. And in the end, when you sum it all up, it's got a lot better prospects.
So Europe, a lot of students sleep on it as a study abroad destination. And yet recent reports like Study Abroad Trends have suggested the UK, Germany, Netherlands, Sweden, France all offer immigration-friendly policies, affordable education, and generous post-study work permits in comparison to, I believe, US now.
That's any media. I would accuse the BBC of the same kind of sensationalization and biasness, and some Indian media also sensationalizes the dip in the economy of Europe. However, as we well know, the European Union is still one of the biggest markets in the world, one of the biggest economic conglomerates in the world, and economic union, in the world, and that shouldn't be underestimated. In fact, the Indian diaspora has done extremely well in Europe as a whole, and that's something to take
As an example.
Yeah.
Even any other Indian who is still in India can go abroad, go to Europe specifically and take up on like any emerging course in Europe and any other job role that is like there in Europe that is like becoming popular.
Absolutely. I'd say it's the education is still top notch. You've still got the majority of the universities in the top QS 200 or 300, really cutting edge courses. One of the advantages of Europe is it's even more affordable than studying in Canada or Australia or the US, for example, primarily because the degree courses are shorter. A lot of European countries like Ireland, Germany, the UK, their masters is only 1 year long. Now, that means your living expenditure, your tuition fees, everything is almost halved on what a master's would be, for example, in Australia, in the US, or in Canada, or in India for that matter as well. So by the time you compare an Indian master's course, even be it an IIT, IIM, or even other private colleges and universities and decent universities in India, you're talking about 2 years of tuition fees. And I can tell you, most of the time, by the time you tally up the tuition fees in India for a 2-year master's versus a 1-year master's in Ireland, in Germany, in the UK, in Finland.
Most of the European countries.
Most of them, yeah. Finland is a really good one. Netherlands is a really good one. Malta, if you're doing nursing, is a very good one. Then I would say it is, if the tuition fees is costing you less, particularly in India, if you go to Bangalore or you go somewhere, I mean, obviously if you're from Bangalore, then that doesn't count. Yeah. But if you go outside of your own town, then you've got a living expense in India as well. Yeah. And I'd say India now is not the India that it was 7, 8, 10 years ago. Yeah. India is fairly expensive to live in, especially the metro cities. The living expense is not so cheap here. Yes, I appreciate it's definitely cheaper than Europe, but the difference, as we were saying earlier, has the gap has shortened.
There's not much of stark contrast between like the finances, like if you go to Europe and like the expenditure that you will have, it's not that different from what you might have to spend if you go to like out of Delhi or like say out of your hometown.
Absolutely. I think particularly tier 1 cities like Bangalore, like Delhi, like Mumbai, the rent is expensive, the living expenses are expensive.
Skyrocketing almost like.
Absolutely. Which then begs the question that if it's going to cost me 2 years in tuition fees as well as living somewhere expensive, with expensive living costs. Whereas if I go to the UK, I've got 1 year of living cost, and then I've got, or anywhere in Europe for that matter, I've got 1 year of living costs, 1 year of tuition fees to pay, and then I've got a stay back of between 1 to 3 years, depending on the country, and we can go through that in some detail afterwards as well. Then I'm essentially going to be getting a graduate job, which, if it's a STEM course, then your starting graduate salary will be somewhere at least in the region of 30 lakh per year. And you can earn that as well as pay your own living costs, and then have money left over at the end before when you come back to India, as well as having a cutting edge international degree at a far higher ranked university, and better experience and savings by the time you come back to India. And you'll probably get a more senior role in India as well, because that experience will count for more when you get back. So in some ways, it's a no-brainer. I would like to go into more detail, but ask away and let's see if we stumble upon that.
Yeah, so we can address this in our next question, ROI, like return on investment.
Fantastic.
So parents and students often lose their sleep over finances. So, which brings me to my next question. Is studying abroad worth it? As the founder of Admissify, what can you say is the real return on investment if you go to study abroad?
Considering ROI, and like you say, that's really quite important. I think it would be very important to realize that studying abroad now, you can get unsecured student loans for. And not just private institutions which might have higher rates of interest. Even the SBI, we get discounted rates for student loans, unsecured student loans for students. That means no properties, no having to put anything on from your parents or ask for that kind of or put that kind of burden on financial burden on parents. And the reason that banking institutions, and we all know banking institutions are very clever with their sums. The reason that they're happy to give unsecured loan is because the student themselves is an asset, particularly after graduating. And these banks consider a person who has studied abroad at these top institutions, studying these new courses, to be such an asset that they will become the asset themselves, and therefore they don't need underwriting or collateral. Whereas these kind of loans are not available for students
studying in India.
Absolutely. So that says a lot about what the corporate world makes of your degree choices and your degree programs. So that's a very important part of the sort of calculus when working out what the ROI is. What I'd say afterwards is, as I just sort of alluded to a little bit earlier, when we rack up, say I was to take the UK or Ireland as an example, your master's tuition fees would be around about 15 lakh rupees. Your living expenses for the whole year may be somewhere around about 15 to 20 lakh for the year. That includes accommodation and it includes living expenses, etc. Now, that racks up to say around about 30 to 35 lakh for the first year, right? And then you've got 2 years of post-study work permit. So let's go back and see how much you can make, or how much that can actually be reduced to. So scholarships. Admissify has the best record in India per the amount of students we send for the highest scholarship track record, which means that most of our students get a minimum of at least 3 lakh of a scholarship, up to 100% scholarships, which quite a few of our students have got. Now that means that even if we were to go as an average or take the minimum scholarship, if your tuition fees comes down to from 15 lakh to around about 12 lakh or 11 lakh, then that's a point worth considering. And then we've come to the first year's expense being somewhere around about being the 30 lakh mark with the expenses and tuition fees and the living cost. Now, let's say you do a part-time job, which is a very minimal thing, and we are based in the UK, and so we've helped a lot of students get part-time jobs by providing them experience, and we also have a few hospitality companies that we're tied up with in the UK to help people get those jobs. Now,
I don't think like any other study abroad consultancy offers like that service to like students who they are like sending abroad for studies, helping them with their part-time jobs especially. I don't think that's like a USP that many study abroad consultancies offer. I believe.
Absolutely. You're very right. In fact, it's a USP that nobody offers. We are the only consultant in the whole of India that provides the facility of helping people with graduate jobs, part-time jobs, and post-graduation visa sponsorship as well.
Okay.
Which, I often say to students, there's a difference between admission and a career. Every
Okay.
consultant will help get the admission. Nobody will help you with your career. And your career begins where your education ends.
So essentially, Admissify is not just a study abroad consultancy, but like a career placement expert in its whole sense.
I would say, yeah, that's a better and more accurate description of what we are.
Right.
But coming back to that ROI calculation, if I do a part-time job,
Yeah.
I can expect to make over 1 year, doing the bare minimum of 20 hours a week, part-time, which is allowed for anybody who's studying. I can make around about 1 lakh to 1.2 lakh a month.
Right.
So by the time the year is up, you can have 12 to 15 lakh you can make just doing a part-time job of 20 hours a week. Now, if you deduct that from your 30 lakh expense, we're talking about 15 lakh for 1 year. That's pretty amazing, considering if you were to study abroad in India for 1 year in India, your tuition fees would be somewhere around about 8 to 10 lakh. And then your living expense, if you're living in a metro city, would probably come in at around about at least 5 lakh, I'd say, if not more than that.
Yeah.
So we're already drawing parallel. Now, in India, you would have another whole year of education afterwards,
Yeah.
and you'd be done in 1 year in the UK. Now we've got 2 years of post-study work opportunity, post-study work visa. Now, say you make 30 lakh a year for your first year
Right.
in the UK, which is a typical graduate starting salary.
Right.
Your living expense is still going to be that 15 lakh. So you would have roughly around about 15 lakh of savings,
Right.
right? And then add 10% increment on your second year and say that goes up to about 35 lakh. Again, you've got another 20 lakh of saving, right?
Right.
So you stand to get at 30 to 35 lakhs of saving plus 2 years of work experience at a global company with foreign experience. Say the student then comes back to India, your employability or your employment prospects or your salary where you'd start from would be far higher than somebody who than your Indian counterpart who studied in India. So I would say if we work it out on ROI, I think studying abroad, particularly in Europe, it might not be the same calculus for the US, for Canada, for Australia, means that that Europe would win pretty much hands down
in comparison to India.
In terms of ROI.
Right.
I think that is extremely crucial. And so, yeah, I would say, I hope that answers that question.
It absolutely does. Which makes me want to ask you the next question, that applications for studying abroad have been increasing. Competition is going to be fierce. That means like the competition is going to be fierce for the universities that Indian students will be applying to. How can a student actually stand out if it's not just about grades anymore? What else is it about?
I presume you mean when you're studying abroad?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think one of the major misconceptions in India, and it's perhaps not a misconception as opposed to a normalization in India, which is that you are assessed on your grade, on simply your academic merits, on your grades.
Mm-hmm.
The competition for admissions in India at any college is so high that the only real way to gauge a student is to see in a quantitative way who has achieved slightly higher marks. And that applies to your admissions in the IITs, in the IIMs, in the DUs, in all of the top colleges in India. So what an important thing is to note is that is not how admissions are processed or calculated when studying abroad. The universities want to know how well-rounded the candidate is. Right. So to give you an example, if somebody has 90% and somebody else has, say, 75%,
right.
But the 75% student has really good LORs, like today we are sitting in the Shikshalaya, which is Admissify, which Admissify works with, which is a charitable school here in West Delhi, and where some of our students come to contribute, to volunteer, to give some learning to the students here. Things like that, like LORs and corporate SOPs, but particularly like a non-academic, socially responsible LORs, like from this Sikshaalaya, for example, are very, very highly valued and respected by foreign admissions tutors. It shows that you're willing to give back to the community. It shows that you have a rounded profile. You're not just an academic bookworm, as we call it. Any sports, any other experience, any glowing LORs from other places, they all count to showing how well-rounded of a student you are, be it as well as academic, non-academic, extracurricular achievements like sports, like a skill, like chess, like social volunteering, like any other projects that have been done. On top of that, the key is a really, really good SOP. And you can only write a good SOP when you have a well-rounded profile. And the SOPs need to be written in a way that a foreign admissions tutor at some of the top universities would be looking for. Now, what a lot of Indian students make a mistake, they're excellent students, they may even have a well-rounded profile, but they write an SOP which is it comes across a bit boastful, or it is quite long. Now, because I've read many of them myself, so not to cause any offense, but that's the way it sometimes comes across. And admissions tutors will generally want something concise. They want to know why that university, they want to know why that city, they want to know what you're going to do with that degree. How are you going to perpetuate your career with it? How are you going to further your contribution to the workforce and to the community with that qualification, with that degree? And they all want to know all of this in a very clear, concise manner. They don't want you to go on for pages and pages about it. So that's the reason why Admissify has achieved such high scholarships and so many scholarships for all of our students, is because our SOPs are extremely well written. We know exactly what admissions tutors are looking for. We have various tie-ups with corporate companies in India in various different fields, as well as charitable organizations like the Sikshaalaya we're sitting in right now. And therefore, we make the profile of the student incredible, incredibly valuable, and for an admissions tutor.
So, we have covered a lot about studying abroad. There's one very integral aspect that we are yet to cover, something that most students look after they finish their course, which is post-study work options, or careers post-study. Because here's the thing, a admit letter might get you admission to a top university and everything, but it is what you do after you complete your course and everything, that is what really matters. So what do you have to say on that?
Very good point. As I said slightly earlier, your career starts where your education ends. Your education, getting the admission, is the first step. Studying well when you're abroad is the second step, and then you take your first step of your career. So getting jobs is extremely important. A lot of students get frustrated that go abroad. They say we find it difficult to get jobs. Well, that's a problem that a lot of students face because nobody is there to help them. If we look at it, consultants in India provide an invaluable service in terms of helping students choose a university and apply to the best universities. Now, if you have a consultant who really knows what they're doing, they will get you a better admission or get you a higher scholarship. And that's the difference, right? But that's just step one in that story, as we were saying. Now, most people have no support when they're looking for a job after they've graduated. And that's where Admissify comes in. That's our unique ability. We help students get that job. Now, if I was to explain to you one story about how it works abroad in terms of getting those jobs. Now, a lot of foreign companies want you to have some work experience or relevant work experience. Now, a lot of students might have some relevant experience from India, but reference companies check your experience. They won't consider calling an Indian company. It will be considered as offshore experience. They want some onshore experience. Now, the parent company of Admissify, there's two parent companies. One is one of India's largest logistical supply chain companies, which is a South Korean and Indian joint venture. And CJ Darsel, and the other parent companies of Admissify are all UK based in real estate development, in hospitality, and in various other fields like IT and architecture. Now, through those parent companies, we have a lot of corporate tie-ups in the UK and in Europe as well, where we help students get internships, paid and unpaid internships. But what that in effect does is give that student onshore experience, relevant experience to their graduate degree program. And then we then give them an internship certificate, and we act as their referee, i.e. their reference. So when a referencing company calls, they call us in the UK, our parent company, and our parent company will give a glowing recommendation of our student. And then they clear their references, and they actually get through to the next stage of the employment process. After that comes the interview stage. Now, again, the style of interview is slightly different abroad than it is in India. I've taken many interviews in India, and of course, I'm a director of a few different companies in the UK. So I've taken many interviews in the UK as well. The style of giving an interview is very, very different. And if the Indian style of giving an interview was something I was listening to when I was in the UK, I would find it quite different, not normal.
Not relevant to what the UK-based company needs.
Absolutely. It would come across as slightly abnormal. And then anybody would be forced into thinking whether this person would be a good fit. They would be able to
assimilate in the company environment and everything.
Very well said, The assimilation might become a slight factor of consideration. So we also do mock interview assistance, and we do those and train our students on what kind of interview faux pas there are, what kind of tips and tricks they can learn, and then that really helps getting the job. All of this is really, really invaluable. It's so impactful and so significant in terms of their ability to get the job. We also then help with visa sponsorship. So we help them get jobs in companies that have visa sponsor licenses, if that is what they're looking for. If they want to stay back after the 2 years post-study, or 3 years in some cases, then they will use that to get a job at a company where they can continue to PR.
So Admissify has really lived up to its tagline of being a career placement expert. What kind of success stories has Admissify built?
I think there's quite a few actually. Now, having sent in our 8 years of operating in India, they've progressed very well. Got quite a lot of promotions, and a lot of the students, Admissify students that I speak to, they're almost indispensable to their managers, and they've overtaken everybody else, which is kind of a testament as to what I was saying earlier, that Indians and the Indian diaspora does really, really well abroad. It does really well because I think being Indian, I feel like we have a mental advantage, and then also when we put our minds to it, we can work really hard. And you combine both of those aspects, and you really have an advantage above a lot of other people in the Western countries, whether that be work ethic or intelligence or any other thing.
So what about accommodation and in-country support? Like after a student lands in whatever study abroad destination they had their eyes set on, what kind of support can they expect from Admissify?
So actually, the journey of Admissify started actually 10 years ago. We're an 8-year-old company, but started 10 years ago, and we started being India's first student accommodation provider for the UK and for Europe. We had the largest range of accommodation. We still have some of the largest ranges of accommodation across Europe. And it's really, really crucial. It's important for the parents, it's important for the student to be in some way certain that you have a place when you arrive. Back in the day, and I'm talking about when I had friends from India was studying, and that was more than 10, 12, 13 years ago, students used to come and then sleep on people's couches, or a relative of a relative, or a chachu's mamu, something, and now they don't. They come straight from the airport, and then either we are there to greet them, or we send someone if they need it. So we have a collection service in most airports in the UK and Ireland.
Right.
And Germany as well.
Right.
And they get picked up and they get taken straight to their accommodation, which is already pre-booked. Any student can do a virtual viewing, see what their room is going to be like,
Right.
See what the facilities are. Through Google Street View, you can walk around the place, see what the neighborhood is like, etc. Look, Europe and European cities are probably the safest place in the world to
Right.
live in. So safety generally is certainly not a concern. And then on top of that, the amenities are available everywhere, like they are in India now. So everything is at your
Right.
fingertips.
Lastly, with AI projected to replace about 85 million jobs by the end of 2025, what is your advice to students who want to future-proof their careers?
Coming back to something I touched on slightly earlier,
Right.
I think multidisciplinary courses, mixed stream courses,
Right.
are extremely crucial.
Right.
It is one of the most important things, I would say, one of the most important facets of studying abroad, which is definitely not available in India.
Right.
You see, the issue becomes if you have a science background, you stay limited to a science background
Right.
in India. If you're from a commerce background, you stay limited to a commerce background,
Right.
which is an extremely limiting factor in trying to pursue advanced education
Right.
for growing jobs.
I think Indian universities are trying to broaden their horizons when it comes to like offering courses and multidisciplinary subjects, but it's like the issue that still prevails is of their global recognition. I believe so.
Yeah, so you are right. There are some degree programs in the IITs,
Right.
for example, IIMs, but again, they're quite highly competitive, and then because people have been restricted to certain streams, a lot of students in India are not comfortable maybe mixing a
Right.
stream. As it happens abroad, it's quite easy to get the admission. It's not even though the ranks of the universities are much higher. So, for example, in the top QS 200
Right.
universities in the world, there is only 3 Indian universities, which is IIT, Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore. And other than that, most of the universities we send our students to are in the QS top 200 or top 300.
Right.
And all of these guys offer various multidisciplinary programs. But to come to your question about AI,
Right.
if you've heard of Elon Musk's Neuralink,
Yeah.
there's a lot of courses now that are combining a psychology background to cognitive thinking, cognitive neuroscience
Right.
background with technical engineering like robotics, like software engineering, like data intelligence. And it's all about sort of in that field of things, it's all about how to merge the human mind
Right.
with a technological interface, and not even if it's not even so much as that, it's even more physical, like a human exoskeletons and other such engineering devices which require a science background as well as, say, an engineering background, or other such things. Of course, there is a vast majority of multidisciplinary courses, but we can talk about that in more depth later, I think.
Right. So this has been honestly a great conversation, and there is so much to think about. Like different aspects of this conversation can help students in so many ways. One final piece of advice that you would give to students who are planning to study abroad.
I would say studying abroad, and the biggest advice I can give is, so number one is your admission is your first step to your career.
Right.
Make sure you choose a consultant who's been there, who's done that, who's, if possible, based there, who can help you throughout your whole journey.
Right.
Admission, getting to the university, any help that you might require there. Touching upon one of your points earlier, there's many cases where you might need some support.
Yeah.
I don't want to discuss confidential cases of students, but there's been many a time that students have reached out to us with a very unorthodox set of requirements or help that they need, where sometimes I think if we weren't there to help them, I wonder how they would have managed. It can include anything from being deregistered from a university to far more
Extreme cases.
However, I think realizing that your education is the first and most important step to your future career, but that your future career involves getting a really good job and getting good experience, whether that be internships or getting a very good postgraduate job is crucial to taking the first steps in your actual career. And that dictates where you will end up 5 years or 10 years into the job market. So that's extremely important. The other advice I'd give is you really need to know what programs are available to you. And I think holistic career guidance is extremely important. You shouldn't be just changing or selecting, you shouldn't just be selecting a study program on the basis of what do I want to study. You should actually be thinking about what is it that I want to do in my life? What new industry am I interested in? Do I want to be involved in drone manufacturing, the defense industry? Do I want to be involved with the next generation of AI and software tech? Do I want to be in that fine line between human and technology interface?
Biotechnology.
Biotechnology. Do I want to be into mechatronics? Do I want to be into anything and everything? And think about what field you want to be in. Solar, green, electrification, anything. The world is your oyster, and all these industries are coming up. In 10 years, they will be the main industries of our future. So once you decide on what kind of industry you're interested in, I think that's when you reverse extrapolate what kind of programs are available to you, and then where the best place is to study. So that's my biggest advice. The world is your oyster. There's many options available. Make sure you do your ROI calculations to see actually how good of a proposition it is, what the degree programs are that are available, and then what kind of innovative career you can pursue.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.